wrap up and talk about Nottingham Forest, Pete. Now, actually, surprisingly, Nuno's future has been in question over the last week or so. Is there any validity to that news, please, Pete? Could we see Nuno potentially leaving the City ground this summer?
I don't think you can ever second guess the Greek owners at Forest, what they might do. Obviously, Nuno was brought in difficult circumstances after Steve Cooper left. He was such a huge fans' favourite at the City ground, but Nuno came in and he did what was needed. He kept them in the Premier League. Like Conor mentioned, they had a points deduction against them, but they still ended up securing Premier League survival, and that was the aim. But Mr. Makronakis is a very ambitious man. He will be looking the club to push on, and if he feels Nuno is not the right man for that job, he will have no issues with replacing him and bringing somebody else in. There's been talk of Fulham's Marco Silva being a potential candidate for that job. I'd find that a bit surprising. I don't think Marco Silva is in any rush to leave Fulham right now. He's just signed a new long-term deal earlier this year. He's got a lot of control at Fulham now as well, so he'll be looking to build on what he's done at Craven Cottage rather than move to another club, I think, right now as well. So for Forest, right now, it's going to be another big summer for them. They've got PSR regulations to be contending with as well. They will be desperate not to have another points deduction, which they did this season when they had that 4 points deduction. So they're looking to potentially offload some players before June 30th as well, just to balance their books. But yeah, for me, Nuno, I think he did a good job at Forest last year. Obviously, he has come in for criticism for maybe his style of football. In some respects, it's maybe a bit too defensive. Maybe that's why there's been talk that Makronakis could be open to changing him in the dugout at the City ground as well. But I think for me right now, Nuno, you have to give him his first full pre-season in charge, and obviously he'll be looking back in the transfer market as well, and then you'll have to see how he gets on next season. But I think for him and for Forest, the key is to get off to a good start. They don't want to find themselves in another relegation battle next season for sure.
I mean, Pete, you mentioned in there potentially about some summer sales. We've seen that Orel Mangala looks like he could be leaving the club. Who else could be sold, please, this summer? And are we now expecting an exodus potentially relating to their FFP and PSR concerns?
Yeah, it seems obviously we thought they might have to sell some of their big stars before that June 30th deadline to comply with PSR, but it seems now the club only need maybe to bring in around £20 million to ensure that they don't fall foul of those regulations. Obviously, Mangala making that move to Lyon permanently for 20 million is a big help to Forest. There'll be other fringe players that the club could look to offload. Joe Worrell, we spoke about before, he's coming back from a loan at Besiktas. The club will be open to offers for him. There's interest from some championship clubs in him. I think Nuno Tavares at left back as well. There could be interest. They could be willing to let him move on as well. He's not really going to be playing regularly in the team, and I think they'll probably have to maybe offload one of their goalkeepers. They've got that many goalkeepers at the City ground. So Vlachodimos, who they spent big money on from Benfica, I think he could be allowed to leave as well. And if they could sell maybe 2 or 3 of those fringe players, that might go a long way to making up that £20 million that Forest need to bring in to comply with the PSR regulations. So yeah, obviously it's a bloated squad at the City ground, and I'm sure Nuno will be looking to sort of thin it out and balance it and look to improve it this summer with some top signings of his own.
And Connor, one name that I know Arsenal have potentially targeted was Murillo, the centre-back. Would you take him at the club? Do you think he'd be a good addition to the squad? And actually, how much do you feel Arsenal should potentially pay for him if they are to, say, go after him potentially?
It's a weird one because he's actually a pretty decent little player. He's really good this season, Forest. I'm not sure he would fit into the style of play, how we play, but with a bit of a track record in recent seasons of just like going for Premier League proven players, like obviously Kai Havertz, Declan Rice, and the list goes on with like Ben White, and a lot of success stories. I feel like Arteta and Edu, they're pretty. They like to. It reminds me of Liverpool a few years ago when they were like Mane and Van Dijk from Southampton. It's like Premier League proven. You know what you're going to kind of get. So I don't see why he wouldn't be a decent signing for most teams. I don't think he'd fit into Arsenal. I don't know how much game time he'd get either, to be honest. Like Saliba and Gabriel, they'd keep anyone out of the team, like the way they play, and their fitness for both. Like I know Saliba got injured a bit towards the back end of last season, but in general, like I think he played every single minute this season in the Premier League for Arsenal. He was like the first outfielder to do it since like 1990 or something silly. So their fitness is pretty insane. So I'm not sure how many minutes he'd even get outside of cup competitions, basically. And I think he's a bit better than being a bit part player sort of thing. And the price, I think Forest would want like a pretty penny for him, like at least 50 mil comfortably, given how good he's been. And I reckon there'll be a lot of Premier League teams interested in him. I look at Newcastle, for example. They could do it with a centre half. I think he'd be class there. But yeah, I think Arsenal are actually pretty set in terms of centre halves more than anything. We've got Jaco Kivior as well. We've got Tommy Asu who can actually play there as well. I think centre back's probably one of the one players we don't really need. We're pretty set there. So I don't know, 50 mil for him would be a pretty fair price, I'd say. I just don't think he would be necessary at Arsenal right now.
And Pete, in terms of targets potentially for the club, what sort of positions have been targeted potentially? Are there any names, please, that we can speak about that they might be looking to sign this summer?
Yeah, I think they're obviously looking to bring in another striker to the club. They struggled for goals last season. Chris Wood was their top scorer, and obviously he had a real purple patch in front of goal at the back end of the season. Che Adams from Southampton is one player that's firmly on the radar. Obviously, he is a free agent at the end of this month. He still has yet to agree a new deal at Southampton. They would love to keep him. There is other interest from other clubs in the Scotland International as well. Wolves are very keen, and there's interest from abroad as well. But yeah, Forest are sort of pushing to try and lure the striker to the City ground. And again, being a free agent, he would go a long way to helping with PSR requirements and everything else. And it looks like they're close to signing another goalkeeper, just what Forest needed. It looks like Carlos Miguel, a Brazilian from Corinthians, is in advanced talks to join the club as well. I think he's got a release clause of around 3.4 million, which Forest are ready to activate. So it looks like that deal is close to happening as well. So goalkeeper and striker are two of the positions that I think Forest are actively working on. I'm sure there will be other areas of the team that will look to strengthen, but I think as we've talked so much about PSR and FFP, I think keeping hold of their best players will be vital to Forest this year. And if they can keep hold of the likes of Gibbs White, Anthony Elanga, Murillo, Hudson-Odoi, that would be a huge boost to the club, because there was fears that they might have to sell some of those players. But if they can sell some of the fringe players to balance the books, then Nuno will have a good squad to work with next season if he can keep hold of those best players.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.